My dream is when I first moved to United States, become U.S. citizen.
Opportunity and choice, freedom.
Easy part is to become American. The difficult part, say, I'm not Chinese anymore, because that's a very difficult part.
I am the first generation of my family on either side that was born in this country. It's only with my generation that we really can say that I am fully Chinese American.
In America, there's opportunity. In America, there's liberty. In America, there's a free enterprise system. In America, dreams come true.
We have the best of both worlds. We know what is the good part to be American, and we also know the good part about Chinese.
In the mid-1800s, Imperial China was grand, but America was golden. To some, the Golden Land. To others, the Golden Nest. To the Chinese, the Gold Mountain.
So all these men come over, they hear these fantastic tales of being able to pick gold off the streets. The poorest man in the village goes away for 1 or 2 years and comes back the wealthiest. Fabulous tales.
They were coming to make some money here and go back to China as wealthier people.
Even after the gold runs out, Chinese men continue coming to the West Coast, especially California, because they recognize there are all sorts of opportunities here.
In America, Chinese worked to link East and West in more ways than one. From tiny Chinese fishing villages like this,
Other groups did not meet, but yet they persisted.
when jobless Americans looked for scapegoats for their problems, they saw the Chinese. Throughout the land, Chinese people were harassed, sometimes violently. Their businesses were burned. They were driven out of towns. They were called coolies, a contemptuous word for unskilled laborers.
They were the other. They were the group that was not really wanted. Wanted for their labor, but not wanted as citizens in this country.
Chinese American history is really important to understanding the national character of the United States. The first group that is singled out as being these outsiders, as being these unwanted, are the Chinese. They are the first group of people to be targeted by race in the immigration laws.
From the late 19th century until World War II, American law actually denied citizenship to Chinese immigrants. And, beginning in 1882, the U.S. Congress passed a series of exclusion laws.
The Exclusion Act basically cut off Chinese immigration to the United States. There was very little coming in after that. This is all part of the period of the Yellow Peril, and America was very concerned about people coming to this country who didn't seem to fit in.
Smugglers of illegal Chinese aliens did a big business until they were caught and their customers deported.
I think there was a concern, particularly in the West Coast, that they would be inundated with Asian immigrants, and the whites would no longer have majority. Chinese women had a problem coming to the United States because immigration officials regarded them as prostitutes for the most part.
With or without proof of marriage, Chinese women might be accused of prostitution and threatened with deportation. In 1900, the ratio of men to women in America's Chinatowns peaked at 27-1. It was a bachelor society.
Some of the men ended up staying in this country for decades at a time, sending money back because this is where they had to work in order to be able to support their families, and yet because of the laws they could not bring their families over. If you were a Chinese man, very difficult ever to find a woman to marry. California also had anti-miscegenation laws. People of different races were not supposed to intermarry. It was a very hard choice for some of the men.
In somewhat the same ways, the Irish were looked upon as the vanguard of the Pope's army that was going to take over America. The Chinese looked upon as the vanguard of racial change in this country that was going to change the complexion of the United States.
Though many Americans disapproved, there were exceptions to the exclusion laws, like the legal loophole for Chinese merchants. Most set up shop in the urban centers from San Francisco to New York, but some followed the lead of Jewish merchants and found opportunity in the small-town South.
African Americans needed a place where they could go and buy their groceries. Stores run by Euro-Americans were not willing to serve them, and so there was a space in which Chinese could set up businesses.
Even with legal status, Chinese were considered part of the colored classes and suffered similar discrimination. During the exclusionary period, strict records were kept on the Chinese in order to determine who was out and who was in. A wife, an adopted son, extended family, the child of a Chinese official, a sister, a brother, even the father of modern China. Those who could not legitimately qualify for an exemption came anyway.
Chinese found ways of getting around those laws. They used fake names, they used fake statuses in order to circumvent the laws. What that meant, however, was that they lived with the constant fear of being discovered.
Then, the devastating San Francisco earthquake of 1906 buried both truth and lie in rubble and ash.
And a lot of the records of the Chinese were destroyed. And so the government really didn't know who was born here and who wasn't. And so a lot of Chinese immigrants began coming over as what were called paper sons.
Sworn affidavits, some true, some false, evidenced a family member already in the United States or claimed citizenship by birth. Immigration officials knew they were being duped, and they didn't like it. Beginning in 1910, this was the first sound of America heard by 175,000 immigrants, mostly Chinese, when they arrived at the Angel Island Immigration Station in San Francisco Bay. For many, it signaled the beginning of a dream. For some, the end.
Angel Island is the dark side of that image of United States as the melting pot, because of course it was set up to try to hold people, to try to prevent people from entering this country, and so it was a place of a lot of fear and a lot of suffering.
Hopeful Chinese immigrants were subjected to intense interrogations designed to sort out and deport the illegal paper sons.
I think Americans like to think of themselves as very welcoming. And of course, I can go back to Ellis Island and where my grandparents came through and feel very good about being in that place where they came to America, where they had the good sense to come to America. And I could put my family's name on the Immigrant Wall of Honor. I think Chinese going to Angel Island, Chinese Americans will have a different emotional experience about the place.
This station closed after a fire in 1940, but what remains, now a state park, is a poignant reminder.
Certainly there's knowledge of what's happened to African Americans through slavery and afterwards, but I don't think there's any sense of a Chinese history in this country.
The calligraphy incised on the barrack walls seems too lovely for its subject, but even a child can understand its value.
My existing circumstances justify my anger. Sitting here, uselessly delayed for long years and months. I am like a cuckoo in a cage.
This has been one of the difficulties in writing about Chinese American history, that this older generation that went through the discriminatory immigration laws that passed through places like Angel Island don't really want to speak about that time.
In America, all eyes are on the future.
I'm obviously an American, but also one with Asian roots. And that's a part of me. And I'm very proud of that, and I'm very comfortable with that. I think immigrants are the most patriotic residents and citizens of the country, because they have the advantage of contrast and comparison. And they can see what it was like in another country, and they can understand the difference here in America.
World War II was a turning point for the Chinese in America, From the mid-1930s to 1945, nearly 20,000 Chinese Americans joined the U.S. Armed Forces. Citizenship was the reward for their service. In addition, Congress finally repealed the exclusion laws and granted Chinese immigrants the right to become naturalized citizens.
We only changed that in 1943 when China was an ally of the United States in World War II. And after that, we opened up the doors a little more, but very, very little.
But with the Communist Revolution in China in 1949, Chinese in America lived in the shadow of the Red Scare.
United States, very, very frightened of Communist China and also very wary of the Chinese American community. For a very long period of time, people from China, people from Asia were regarded as being intrinsically un-American. Things have changed a lot since the 1960s with the Civil Rights Movement. There's been this embrace of the concept of a multicultural nation, but that was not always the case.
The big change was the 1965 Act, which finally gave China a quota of 20,000, which was the quota given to everybody else.
That was 3 years after C.S. Chiang came to America as a student. He never planned to stay.
I have to learn what the Western thinking, and I was studying something about Eastern thinking. And I thought, if I really, really want to understand American, I have to be there. Otherwise, my judgment cannot be fair.
The 1965 Act established preferences for professionals, scientists, and artists of exceptional ability. But Dr. Chiang, a professor of earth sciences with a passion to improve global air quality, stayed in this country for a very personal reason. He married an American.
I think the first time I went back with him to mainland China was in 69 or 70. He was clearly a foreigner as well as I.
My wife is Jewish, have 5,000 years culture, and or myself 5,000 years. So you can say, my kids maybe will have 10,000 years culture. But in the other sense, my children maybe have 10,000 years of the baggage.
Chinese Americans today march to the beat of many different drums. How much of China, with nearly 5,000 years of heritage, can melt into a nation that's just over 200 years old?
We don't really have to melt. We never really have melted.
In America, old Chinese customs are new again, like the Chinese New Year, celebrated with Chinese fireworks and an American parade. Or annual dragon boat racing, a Hong Kong tradition that dates back 2,000 years. As the ancient legend goes, the popular but sorrowful imperial poet Qiu Yan drowned himself in the Milo River, and the village folk raced out to frighten the fish from nibbling his body. This team won't be going to the finals in New York, but they win in other ways.
It's been fascinating. I really have benefited greatly culturally. I know it sounds may sound hokey, but it really is true. It's some things that I never would have gotten to done otherwise. It's been great.
On a Saturday night at Lonnie Wong's house, there are many cooks in the kitchen. Mandarin Chinese and English mingle as everyone pitches in to make a traditional Chinese dumpling feast.
It's funny, at my house we have like competitions to see who can make the prettiest ones.
In my house we have competitions who can make them the fastest.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems to
Lonnie Wong, activist and homemaker, came to America from Taiwan in the early 1970s. It was a pivotal decade for Chinese America. In 1972, President Nixon made an historic visit to China. In 1976, both U.S. presidential campaigns courted the Chinese American vote. In 1979, President Carter and Deng Xiaoping restored diplomatic relations between the U.S. and the People's Republic, reuniting members of long-separated Chinese-American families. Looking back on her 30 years in America, Lonnie is satisfied.
I'm going to retire here. I want to see my grandchildren raised here. So I'm perfectly happy here.
Lonnie's children are American-born, but they have had their challenges.
Even though they feel they're totally American, people look at them, they still think that they're Chinese. Oftentimes when we travel, people ask them, what part of China they're from.
I think it's very difficult for the Asian American, to be totally integrated. I think the Chinese American community need to open up more and be more actively involved in the society.
People think that the Chinese don't want to integrate into local community because they feel superior, but I think they feel more comfortable speaking their own languages and share the same cultural among each other.
Some call this the Chinatown mentality. America's Chinatowns, large and small, have protected the Chinese and their customs well into the 20th century.
The Chinese were still discriminated against, and there was still a lot of hostility towards them, so they remained in their enclaves. And so you had this big one in San Francisco, and you had another very large one in New York.
Thanks to Hollywood, the idea of Chinatown has captured the imagination of generations of Americans.
And they survived basically because there's a lot of Chinese immigrants still coming into the country.
And because the tourists love them, even if their more lurid attractions like opium dens and warring tongs are long gone. There are other stereotypes too, less wicked and more real, like the model minority.
I'm not so sure that we're all good in math. I know that's definitely not true with me.
It's not all the Chinese that's doing excellent in school, because we have so many Chinese students excel, so we just look at the Chinese American student and say, oh, they're all wonderful students.
Any person coming into this country, regardless of ethnicity, can pursue whatever dreams they want to. And if they work hard, if they have the right preparation, if they're lucky, the probability is that they'll do it.
Even though I've been here 30 years, I still know exactly when I first come here how it feels to be new immigrant.
You got all kind of freedom of choice. Then you're confused sometimes, but you're amazed, surprised, and excited.
I think the number one barrier is appearance. You look different, from Asia. Number two is language.
Mary, could you do me a favor? Excellent, very good.
When I first come here, it's not that easy. I have a hard time learning my English, and I cry a lot when I was in class.
No problem. No problem.
We have two kind of clients. Some client coming in for like basic English class, or some like basic help. That's why we have computer training, we have job training and placement service.
What I think I can express very well.
We need more knowledge to improve ourselves. My English is getting better now. Much better.
The Asian American Service Agency works within the Chinese American community, continuing a long history of organized efforts to help Asian immigrants access the full benefits of American life.
It's going to take some time, for the Chinese American and become part of the American society, totally integrated.
I think if we have more exchanges and have better understanding, I think that was improve the relationship.
So we really want to look to the rest of the community to try to find some of these answers.
Both Lonnie Wong and C.S. Kiang are board members of the National Association of Chinese Americans, one of several groups that encourages and accomplishes more contact between minority and majority communities, and greater participation in politics too.
Confucius rate politician and military and commerce is in the bottom of the society. And so a lot of Chinese don't want to involve in politics because they think that politics is not worthy. I would advise them that to integrate themselves into the mainstream and do more community service and participate more in the political process. And if they want to run for office, even better for them.
Is the senator there?
Elaine Chao, the first Chinese American ever to hold a cabinet-level position in the United States government, was appointed as Secretary of Labor by President George W. Bush in 2001.
I think one of my fears was that I would make a mistake. And the New York Times would have on their headlines, Elaine Chao disgraces family.
In 1949, Elaine's parents immigrated from China to Taiwan.
So when I was about 5 years old, they wanted to come to America. And it was about 3 years later, when I was about 8 years old, before my father was able to get the rest of us to join him in America. Like most Asian American families, the family unit in itself is very intact. It was the center of our lives. The way I make them proud is if I do a good job, and not because I'm the first Asian American woman in this position. You know, I grew up, again, with the sense that I wanted to contribute. My parents are constantly giving back to the community. So I think I learned a lot from them, that it was really important to give back.
I always try to teach my kids is this: if you know how to give instead of just take, eventually people will give it back to you.
At the dawn of the 21st century, Chinese Americans are a growing part of the tapestry of America.
America was built from all kinds of immigrants.
The United States can demonstrate it. This is the place we can accept all the culture. We can live together and with the respect of the difference.
This country was not only built on immigration, but it survives on the basis of immigration. And I think the Chinese are very much part of the survival of the United States into the future.
Chinese America survives because Chinese continue to be very determined to try to make a living by coming to the Gold Mountain.
In America, there are too many opportunities. More opportunities than one can possibly grab at any one moment.
That's why people keep coming.